So thanks for the introduction. I guess, as I was working at Tourism Australia and quite involved in the digital strategy, particularly for the Chinese market, China being the number one outbound market for Australia, as it is for or was for all of the world's markets. And so just really saw the opportunity about connecting with the Chinese consumer, that kind of exploding middle class and in particular. My now partner, Alpha's you approached me, and he'd been working had his own agency for 10 years in Shanghai. He approached me and asked me to join. Could we have a bit more of a focus on global, i.e. bringing global brands into China to take advantage of such an amazing market. So we obviously brought me on board, kind of rebranded the business that he had for many years to ASAP Plus. And then we've been basically over the last 4 years working closely with international businesses predominantly, with a focus on travel, tourism, and then luxury brands as well. All of which kind of build this picture of our target audience, the same people that tend to buy luxury goods and foreign brands are the same people that tend to travel outbound to places like Australia and the UK. And so it's I guess our value proposition is that idea that we understand the audience, we understand the market, and we can help your brand, your organisation connect with that Chinese audience. I mean, the growth is kind of astronomical. I think the first thing that I would say is that you really don't have a picture of that until you are in, a city like Shanghai and seeing just the fast movement, seeing all the brands. It's a little bit like if you're an operator in a destination and you're seeing influxes of Chinese, tourists coming. It's kind of in China, this boom in these international brands over the last few years has been significant. And I think the interesting thing is, and the thing that I guess I've seen evolve, is that the Chinese consumer is more sophisticated all the time, becoming more sophisticated. The digitization, use of mobile, mobile payments, all of those things are kind of, until you've seen it, until you've been a part of it and experienced it, it's hard to get it, how China really is mobile first, particularly in that kind of middle class, high net worth. But not just that, the lady selling flowers on the street, you'll pay via WeChat. It's kind of a really surreal kind of environment, but just full of opportunity and hugely dynamic, would be the way that I would kind of paint the last few years. Probably an interesting one just recently was the work that we're doing with Wine Australia, and Wine Australia really wanting to, I guess, have Australian wine seen as premium. So one of the challenges at the moment is not necessarily, or was a challenge, is not necessarily the volume challenge, but it's that premiumization challenge. So French wine really being seen as the premium choice, apart from a few obvious choices from Australia. And so the idea was, how do we position Australia, and I guess this concept of the Aussie way of doing things, not necessarily following the rules, not necessarily following the traditions that other regions in the world might necessarily, winemakers might follow, and telling that story through video, through, obviously copy and pictures, and across social platforms, and really inviting the audience to kind of understand and get an affinity with Australian wine and the way Australian wine is kind of crafted and created. And I think it's interesting that an organisation like them understands that the consumer is constantly evolving, and understands that it's not a volume game necessarily. How do we really reach that premium consumer? And not just the brands from Australia that everybody knows, those halo brands, but others as well who make really fantastic wine. and an opportunity for Chinese consumers to enjoy that wine, not only in China, in a restaurant or at home, but hopefully when they travel to Australia as well. They come and visit a wider range of wine regions. They come and experience, that whole cellar door, maybe a tour, so the idea that it's a part of a bigger picture for travel is kind of important for us as well. And, that's where we're able to help with partnership marketing and aligning different organisations' kind of objectives in campaigns as well. So it's quite interesting, when you look at it and say, well, how can we really help an entire industry, attract that consumer, where hopefully more people can win out of that, economic activity that's provided as a result. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm an example of that. I'm sitting here in Sydney rather than there in Shanghai right now. And, that's just, I think, the reality for the next little while, that borders will be closed. Airlines aren't flying. Many airlines around the world are consolidating, and focusing very much on domestic, in the short and even medium term, which is quite interesting. Qantas here in Australia, for example. And so I think the impact is severe. There's no doubt about that. I think this year Australia was predicting to have almost, or at least 1.5 to 1.75 million Chinese tourists travelling. There's been no travel really since early on in the year. So that's a severe impact, and I think for us, it's kind of, not the time to be in business necessarily to focus all our activity on just, travel and tourism. But what we've done is we've worked with our clients and said, look, now's not the time to kind of go dark as well. Now's not the time to rip everything down. Now's the time to switch to inspiration, aspiration. I like to think that Australia is very much loved. Australian products are very much loved by the consumer in China, and particularly those that look to travel and experience new and unique things. And so now's the time for organisations to be really telling that great Australian story and keep telling that great Australian story, so that we're not lost, amongst all of the other noise that is going on, and that we're still presenting Australia as, the fantastic place it is, to come and visit. And this too will end, this too will pass. I think that's kind of been our message to our travel clients. I think for our luxury clients, the message is a little bit different, because there's still opportunities for cross-border sales in China. Yep. So although just about every major brand is established in China and has are selling their products, there's numbers of niche brands that aren't necessarily that don't necessarily have established shop fronts, that have the opportunity to sell cross-border. And so we've kind of coined this travel retail solution that we've put forward and we've had some success with, where the Chinese consumers still want to purchase, this season's goods, this season's luxury releases, and so how do they do that? And one of the things we've been positioning is that because they can't travel and purchase from the store as part of their overseas trip, what about a cross-border solution? What about a pop-up store solution using a platform like WeChat and the mini programs that are available? And so we've kind of encouraged some of our clients to look into those areas, because obviously with the lack of travel, some of these brands have lots of stock available as well that they would like to move. And so one of the things that I think is interesting, and maybe some stories that aren't being told as much as they should be, is that the government is also doing all sorts of things around tax incentives and around, making some of those cross-border transactions a little bit easier as well. And so, we're seeing that, and we're not the only one who's kind of focusing on that, but we see that as an opportunity for for brands to still take, it's just to still capitalize on the Chinese consumer who still have that money to spend. That's the point. But how do they spend it on the things that they really want to, that are unique, are going to be something that makes them feel good about themselves, and maybe a bit of bragging rights as well. Every brand now is sort of doubling down online in China, and really pushing that online channel significantly. And I think that part of that is just the new reality of what you need to do now in a shop. There's social distancing, there's masks, there's all sorts of things that you now need to be aware of and take into account. And so the idea of really doubling down on online, is what brands are doing. But consumers still want to go to the store. There's no doubt about that particularly in the luxury area, people still want to try things on. They want to touch, they want to feel. So I think that the brands that are doing really well and are really forward thinking are really nailing this online to offline piece, so making sure that there's an entire experience, which is both, that physical experience and the virtual experience. We have a client that we work with who run outlet villages, both in Europe and in China. And it's been really interesting to see, and they don't do e-commerce because, their business model is a model where they offer the brands the ability to sell last season's, lines at a discounted rate. And so, initially, of course, with shutdown, those brands just really struggle, but they're now looking at how, and coming to us asking how they can really be more, aligned across the whole customer journey, because they know that their customers are still looking at their products online, but they need to go to the village to purchase those. So how do they make that easy? How do they make that experience seamless? So order and pick up, it sounds so simple, but those sorts of things are becoming more just mainstream. And so really doing that from your mobile in a really easy, small amount of clicks, really simplified, is kind of what these different customers are asking for, and what the brands now need to provide. And I think that'll become just the norm now. I think that people will now, in this kind of post-COVID world, or COVID world as we're still experiencing, we'll just expect that, and that will have to be provided as well. So yeah, it's definitely changing and evolving. It's a mix. I think that brands that have spent the time to really understand who their target audience should be, and understand who is likely to be purchasing and where those new audiences are going to come from, they're doing well. There's little doubt about it. There's various baby formula brands, for example. There's various cosmetic brands, for example, that are really nailing it. And when you talk to those guys, and when you talk to them, they're people who have committed to not just taking the package off the shelf, if you like, that comes from these platforms, but have really spent the time to partner with a local agency or a local group of people who understand, can negotiate terms as well, can help them understand what kind of the minimum spends are that they need, and when they need it as well. It's not just about saying, let's wait for the Double 11 sales and, buy that particular package and away we go. It's about, looking at, well, how can we build up maybe some of our own channels around that? How can we, augment that with a WeChat play, for example? There's kind in the lead up or afterwards. I know there's restrictions on what you can do cross-platform, but the brands that are really doing well, and what we talk to our customers about as well, I guess, is how you take more of an integrated multi-channel approach, or really looking at it not just through the eyes of one particular platform, but how all those platforms support what it is that you want to do. There's no doubt, however, if you don't do the work and you don't really do the research, or you're not working with a group who have expertise, you can spend a lot of money and not get the results and wonder why. And so I would say, if that's some of the people that, this goes out to, it is worth finding the right partner in China. It is worthwhile, if you're coming from Australia, talking to the AustCham, getting references and those sorts of things, and, making sure you're setting yourself up for success and not just spending a lot of money and not getting that return, I'd say that we have some clients at the moment who are seeing some good numbers, who are seeing that bounce back, if you like, and they're really quite, bullish about it. They feel that, as you say, the worst is over. Other clients, though, it's really unknown. So, for example, our travel clients, it's just unknown at the moment. I think that we're not quite sure when decisions will be made about opening borders, and so you've kind of got this scenario where they want to put money into the market and they want to, promote, say, Australia, or say Queensland or New South Wales. But when do you do that? When do you do it once open borders are announced? Do you do it after? So those are the sorts of things I think that are kind of meaning that people are holding back, some of that spend. And then there's others who we work with a big hotel brand, and their demand is off the scale, in domestic tourism in China at the moment. People still want to travel. People still want to experience. What that tells me is that when the borders open, there will be demand to travel internationally. That's not, I perhaps I'm being a little more optimistic, but I hope that it bounces back quickly as well. And that people are able to travel as soon as it's safe to, and governments open up borders and those sorts of things. So, maybe some of that, some of those trends that we're seeing with travel domestically in China are an indicator of what will happen, with international travel as well.